The global energy market is experiencing a catastrophic and unprecedented shock as 30% of the world's seaborne oil trade halts. Brent crude has violently surged well past $100 a barrel following an unprecedented geopolitical blockade over the last 72 hours, billions of dollars in essential international commerce have been effectively paralyzed. The Islamic Republic of Iran has completely choked off the Strait of Hormuz to all commercial shipping. This tiny 21-mile-wide waterway is the absolute lifeline for the functioning of the modern global economy. Welcome to Politique News, delivering the geopolitical analysis that cuts through the noise. Please subscribe. To truly understand the sheer magnitude of this crisis, observers must carefully examine the geographical reality of the region. The Strait of Hormuz connects the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman and the open ocean. During peacetime, roughly 20 million barrels of crude oil pass through this narrow choke point every single day. That massive volume represents nearly 1/5 of total global oil consumption, powering the international supply chain. Furthermore, this maritime corridor facilitates 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas exports. Nations like Qatar and the United Arab Emirates rely exclusively on this route to supply energy to Asia. When this waterway is blocked, the industrial engines of China, Japan, India, and South Korea immediately starve. The entire foundation of global industrial manufacturing relies absolutely on the uninterrupted flow of this specific corridor. Yet, within a matter of days, maritime traffic through this vital artery has dropped to virtually zero. Automatic identification system data shows typical daily transits plummeting from over 152 fractions. Currently, 170 container vessels are reportedly trapped inside the Persian Gulf. Meanwhile, another 150 oil tankers sit idling outside, completely unable to enter the waterway. The catalyst for this devastating global paralysis stems from extreme military escalations beginning in late February. The United States and Israel launched coordinated, heavy military strikes targeting Iranian nuclear and military infrastructure. In direct retaliation, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps weaponized the geography of its southern coastline. Iranian military officials transmitted severe radio warnings to all commercial vessels navigating the Persian Gulf. They declared that navigation through the strait was forbidden and that no ship could pass safely. Iran possesses a unique asymmetric capability to control this passage without a massive conventional naval fleet. The mountainous northern coastline provides heavily fortified cover for mobile anti-ship cruise missile batteries. Furthermore, heavily armed fast attack craft have been deployed to aggressively harass massive, slow-moving commercial tankers. Most terrifyingly, intelligence reports indicate the deployment of drifting naval mines directly into the shipping lanes. A single untethered mine can catastrophically disable a commercial vessel, making the waters entirely unnavigable. Foreign naval fleets currently stationed in the region are operating under a state of extreme, unprecedented high alert. Consequently, maritime insurance premiums for any ship attempting to transit have skyrocketed to completely uninsurable levels. The economic risk for global shipping conglomerates has simply become far too immense to justify the journey. The immediate macroeconomic fallout of this military blockade is already rippling through global financial markets. The sudden halt of Qatari liquefied natural gas exports threatens to plunge energy-dependent nations into complete darkness. Countries relying heavily on Middle Eastern gas for electricity are now facing the terrifying immediate prospect of rolling blackouts. The International Energy Agency officially warns that prolonged disruption will trigger an unprecedented worldwide economic recession. The world is not just witnessing a highly localized Middle Eastern military dispute over geopolitical and regional supremacy. This is the weaponization of geography on a scale that threatens the survival of the global economy. History offers a dark precedent for this type of maritime warfare in the Persian Gulf. During the 1980s, the brutal tanker war saw hundreds of attacks against commercial oil vessels. However, even during that prolonged conflict, the Strait of Hormuz was never completely physically closed. What the world is witnessing today is an absolute historical first for international maritime trade. Saudi Arabia has rapidly built massive overland pipelines to bypass the strait and export crude via the Red Sea. Unfortunately, those terrestrial alternatives can only carry a tiny fraction of the region's total daily output. There is no combination of pipelines on Earth capable of replacing 20 million barrels per day. The human impact of this blockade extends far beyond the soaring commodity charts and political theater. Everyday citizens across the entire globe are about to bear the brutal brunt of this asymmetric economic warfare when crude oil prices violently spike. The cost of manufacturing and transporting everything else strictly follows. Working families worldwide will see gasoline and household utilities skyrocket virtually overnight. The surging cost of diesel fuel will immediately trigger massive price hikes for consumer groceries. Furthermore, agricultural sectors face a catastrophic crisis due to trapped raw materials and chemicals. One-third of global seaborne trade in fertilizers typically passes directly through the Strait of Hormuz without crucial components. Like sulfur, farmers cannot finance or plant crops to feed growing populations. Economists warn this disruption could rapidly accelerate into a devastating worldwide food security crisis. Central banks face an impossible and highly destructive monetary calculus. They must choose between raising interest rates to combat hyperinflation or lowering them to prevent economic collapse. Millions of jobs in manufacturing, logistics, and retail could be wiped out if energy costs remain high. Washington and its international allies face an incredibly dangerous strategic dilemma regarding the blockade. The United States maintains that this closure constitutes an illegal act of blatant economic terrorism. Freedom of navigation is a fundamental principle strictly protected by global maritime conventions. Yet, breaking this blockade requires a massive preemptive military strike against heavily fortified Iranian coastal defenses. Retired naval commanders have warned that sending warships to escort civilian tankers would currently be suicidal. The narrow shipping lanes leave massive vessels highly vulnerable to anti-ship missiles and explosive drone swarms. President Donald Trump issued a severe 48-hour ultimatum to the Iranian military command. He demanded that Iran fully reopen the strait without threat or face catastrophic domestic consequences. The White House threatened to systematically obliterate Iran's civilian power plants if the blockade continues. Tehran responded by promising to retaliate against any American strikes by targeting regional energy facilities. They specifically threatened the water desalination plants and electrical grids of neighboring United States allies. If either side executes these apocalyptic threats, the Middle East will plunge into total darkness. A sustained destruction of civilian infrastructure guarantees a humanitarian crisis of unimaginable proportions. Hospitals would lose life support capabilities, water purification would fail, and basic societal sanitation would collapse. The international community is desperately scrambling to find a diplomatic off-ramp to avoid full-scale war. French President Emmanuel Macron is actively leading efforts to organize a secure naval escort coalition. However, this initiative relies entirely on a cessation of active hostilities to ensure operational safety. The United Kingdom has allowed American forces to utilize its strategic air bases for military targeting operations. Meanwhile, nations like China, which imports 40% of its oil through the strait, watch anxiously. Beijing has publicly urged all involved parties to keep the vital shipping lanes open for commerce. Yet, tracking data reveals that even Chinese-flagged cargo vessels are currently trapped by the sweeping blockade. The crisis has exposed a profound, fatal vulnerability in the deeply interconnected modern industrial economy. A single 21-mile-wide waterway holds absolute dictatorial power over the prosperity of billions of people. This raises a highly critical and urgent question regarding the world's reliance on Middle Eastern fossil fuels. Does this unprecedented paralysis prove that a rapid transition to domestic energy is a vital security necessity? Or is the global supply chain inherently destined to remain chained to the volatile geopolitics of the Gulf? Furthermore, is Iran justified in using the strait as leverage to defend against heavy international bombardment? Or does holding 30% of the world's oil hostage cross an unforgivable line of economic warfare? If the United States military attempts to forcefully break this blockade, what are the ultimate consequences? Is the world currently watching the chaotic, uncontrollable opening salvos of a devastating Third World War? The decisions made in the coming days will permanently reshape the global balance of economic power. No nation, regardless of its geographic distance from the Persian Gulf, will be immune to these shockwaves. The era of guaranteed, uninterrupted maritime trade and cheap global energy may have officially ended today. Viewers are strongly encouraged to critically examine the sprawling implications of this historic international standoff. It is essential to pay close attention to how soaring commodity prices will inevitably alter local economies. The volatility of the global market relies heavily on the precarious stability of this single naval choke point. Stay informed, stay deeply critical, and continue demanding absolute transparency from global leaders navigating this crisis. Thank you for watching this comprehensive investigative report into the defining conflict of our time. Politique News will continue providing unrelenting, fact-based geopolitical analysis as this unprecedented global emergency rapidly unfolds.